Scythe.
Bennett's gonna be so mad at me.
Alex marched through the darkness of a tight hallway, following a mysterious stranger, feeling his anxiety spike.
And my germophobia. Is this place up to code?
Dull, tinted windows above let in blue moonlight, sending columns onto their pebbled path ahead, shimmering on the tall stranger's head. She was bald, except for a knot of braided, ash-blonde hair originating just above where her skull met her spine, which hung down like a thick tail, swaying with each of her steps.
Stay calm. Everything will be fine. Just stay calm.
Moments ago, when Alex was left alone by Bennett at the table in the Platinum Hall of Rose Noir, he could feel every unearthed human eye on him. None looked keen to say hello, and he somehow got the distinct impression he was a topic of conversation among the crowd. The stares made him so nervous that the scars on his chest started to heat up, and the wrath inside him was rising to say hello. He shut his eyes, took long breaths, and got his pulse to slow. But when he opened his eyes again, his heart was jump-started. A tall, lean woman with blonde eyebrows was parked at his table, wearing what must have been a few hundred bracelets on her forearms. The shimmering, orange dress she wore was as tight as a second skin, and looked and moved like fish scales. Smiling a siren's grin, she waved her pointer finger. "Hey there, little one. Don't be frightened." She spoke with a sensual, temperate tone. "Couldn't help noticing you getting some heat on. What's the deal, baby?" "No, thank you. I'm good. Just wait." Alex coughed. "Waiting for someone." He coughed again.
Oh, great.
The enigmatic woman studied him with narrow eyes, her head swaying through the air a little too similarly to Joseph's for any comfort. With the sudden swiftness of a snake, she was in the alcove, seated beside him, making Alex jump. She slid a finger over his lips to shush him. "You don't need to speak, sweetie. I know why you're here." Leaning in close to his ear, she whispered, "But why would Nigel wish to speak with you?" Alex was positive he had a dopey, stunned expression on his face.
How does she know about that? What do I do now?
The woman slapped a hand over his mouth, gripping him by the cheeks, and turned him to face her irises, which were deep red, dotted with flashes of orange. "Who are you?" he asked through squished cheeks. She laughed. "Earthly name's Yusay'ne. How about you, baby?" "People call me Alex." She puckered her lips and kissed the air like a chef tasting perfection. "Yes, I know. Alex Barker. It's smart. Simple. No one would ever take a second glance. True invisibility. And how about your old name? Your real name?"
How does she know my last name?
The look she gave confirmed Alex was the mouse and she was the cat. His choices were play along and possibly not die, or mess it up and definitely die. He gave the first answer that came to him. "You know, it's been so long I don't even remember." The expression on Yusay'ne's face was nearly impossible to read. He braced for the worst. "Ha!" She laughed to the rafters. "If I had a sixer of thresh every time I heard that. Why do us Archies always forget our past? Do you think it's because we're ashamed of it?" "Not at all." The response popped out, as Alex found himself falling comfortably into the part.
Isaiah was right. It's easier if I roleplay. Still can't tell if that guy is a lunatic or the wisest creature I've ever met. Either way, when this is over, he and I are going to have a little chat. Got a few things to straighten out.
I'd like to think we aren't ashamed of what we were, or who we are, Yusay'ne said with a soft turn. Most of us know what it's like to be asked to do something you don't wish, but must anyway. She had a saddened drop of her eyebrows. It's always unfair to ask a creature to feel shame for being true to themselves, right? I remember far too much to feel shame for it all. The wars, my old deeds, my old name, Niel Yeus. In Clan Niel, we were taught nothing can ever exist without a present desire to destroy. But no one ever sees that, do they? They see what they want, what the masses want. The teacher was stunned by his sympathy for the woman who was scaring the daylights out of him and seemed to be defending evil. Though she looked as young as 50, Yusay'ne's gaze bore a callous and worn wisdom Alex was only noticing now as her voice cracked. I think... As usual, the teacher felt responsible for whatever distress he may have caused another, real or otherwise. I think if others don't see something so obvious, it's because they're blind. None of us can help what's inside of us. None of us can help our fears or hatreds. They're just there, always looming over us. Yusay'ne smiled with a curious flip of her braided ponytail, then paused so long Alex thought she'd frozen in place. Turned out she was simply studying him. That'll do, she said. On to business. Do you still wish to meet him? Yes or no? Nigel? Yes, and my partner is... That's a no. I'll take you to see him. Only you. Only now. If you wish to hear what he has to say, this is your chance. I'm going to stand up and walk away. If you follow, you'll meet him. If not, you won't. Please nod if you understand. Yusay'ne finished with a closed-mouth grin crawling up her cheeks. The teacher bobbed his head and, before he knew it, was following Yusay'ne through the dance floor, the color of her dress seemingly changing with each step, from orange to red to maroon, making her harder to spot through the crowd and laser lights. Fighting to catch up, he found her near the staircase, not climbing, but darting to the right, approaching a side door beyond the elaborately carved silver handrail. Slipping her hand over the door handle, she opened it and stepped aside for him. This way, Mr. Barker. The next hall was wide and dimly lit by fancy beige sconces attached to deep brown trim running its length, featuring doors with beautiful carvings on their faces, like something from Greek antiquity. Clusters of patrons were scattered throughout, speaking in the more intimate setting. Yusay'ne closed the door behind them, shutting off the noise from the Platinum Hall before gliding ahead. Keeping his eyes on her feet, swift and fascinating as they were, Alex tried to avoid interacting with the small ensembles of unearthed humans, who halted their conversations to watch him pass.
They know what I am. Somehow. I know it.
He then slowed his roll, remembering the 3 times he'd smoked pot in his early 20s, and how paranoid he'd felt then, thinking everyone knew he was high and judging him for it.
Just stay calm. No one knows anything. Stay calm.
Though it was hard to ignore how even the couples making out passionately in the darkness paused for an inquisitive glance, long enough to sniff the air around him like vigorous hounds. Reaching a door halfway down the corridor, half as elegant as the rest, labeled 21A, Yusay'ne stopped. This is the one. Alex was soon following her down a tight hallway, through columns of light from above, watching her braided ball of hair bob back and forth in the dark. Presently, he noticed the area was becoming more industrial chic as they moved, though he had so far assumed it was part of a modern club aesthetic he didn't fully understand.
Is this a janitor's service hallway? Or just made to look like one?
Yusay'ne seemed to be speeding up. Alex then spotted movement ahead and heard jingling keys. A figure was backing into the hall, which seemed to mute Yusay'ne's excitement. She muttered under her breath as they neared an inlet, seemingly little more than a storage space with dirty shelves holding cleaning equipment and toiletries. The figure stepping out of a janitorial closet turned as they neared. A wet mop was clutched in his hand. Though above average height, he was so skinny he might have weighed less than 100 pounds, most of it likely encompassed in his long, dark mane of hair, which hung over his beard-encrusted face. The white t-shirt he wore was stained to the point it appeared to have gotten a tie-dye job using only earth tones. When the janitor spotted Yusay'ne and Alex down the dark hall, he jolted and backed into the shelf behind him, sending half a dozen toilet paper rolls to the ground.
Yusay'ne! Hi!
The janitor said with a hint of panic in his voice.
Didn't expect to see anybody else back here. Sort of an employees-only kind of thing. Know what I mean?
They neared, and Alex read the man's plastic name tag. Hi, my name is Felix. How can I assist you today?
And how proud those employees must be.
Yusay'ne replied to Felix coldly, turning to address Alex.
We'll leave Felix here,
she said his name with a sense of abhorrence,
to his duties, and just go back the way we came.
Ignoring her own words, Yusay'ne continued down her original path.
But you just came from that way,
Felix said, pointing behind them, obviously trying to be as mannerly as possible, unable to intimidate Yusay'ne while standing in still water. She leaned over him, taller than Felix by a head.
One must walk the way one will. Unless, of course, you wish to say otherwise, Nielvile?
Niel what? I thought his name was Felix.
The janitor gave a nervous laugh, as though he wanted to say more, before going back to his business with the spill.
No, totally fine. Keep going. You're bound to find the exit. Have a good night, folks.
Felix took a couple of semi-worried glances back at Alex as he followed Yusay'ne into the farther reaches of the service hallway, which began to feel like a warning the farther they got. Keeping pace with her, Alex soon realized the sounds of the club had completely vanished. Looking back, he could no longer see the janitor's nook, or Felix. But suddenly, sitting in the middle of the hall was a house cat. So white it seemed to glow, swinging its tail, watching him intently, its eyes reflecting like 50-cent pieces.
Where'd he come from?
Seems like we've walked pretty far, Alex said. I can't even hear the music. What do you say we go back, huh? Your boss can meet us in the kissing hallway. Turning back, he first heard a series of cat meows echoing faintly in the dark halls. Then a swift sound like a branch swung through the air, and he felt a powerful grip on his wrist. Yusay'ne's fingers burned as they wrapped around him, stinging more than hurting.
Is something wrong?
She asked.
Don't act scared.
No, I just don't want to go any farther. More meowing grew near.
Right as we were starting to get to know each other? To trust each other?
Yusay'ne said to Alex with glum, pouty lips.
We didn't have to contact you, you know. I could have left you at that table, twiddling your thumbs, waiting for magic to spring. Here I thought you seemed reasonable, and maybe even a little grateful.
I'm not ungrateful. Sorry, he said.
Stop shaking.
What do you say we stop playing games, huh, sweetie?
A low, guttural sound joined Yusay'ne's voice toward the end, a bellowing power emanating along with flashes of crimson in her gaze. She bared her teeth, and Alex noticed for the first time they were pointed, more a shark's than a human. Twisting her head to the side, she jerked once before falling into a dull grin.
You've got nothing to fear from me,
she said.
After all, we're from the same team. I'm simply curious. Never smelled one like you. What's your secret?
No secret. Alex held still, keeping a strong gaze with her. And we can just forget I said anything. I'm okay to keep going. With a sudden change of expression, from suspicious to genial, Yusay'ne released his wrist, backed away, hoisted her shoulders, and took in a huge lungful of air. Accept my apologies. I see now you are a reasonable man, she said, sounding like a whole new person. Mr. Barker, may I present the one you wish to see? Dropping to the side with a bow, as though humbled, Yusay'ne revealed a rigid, slender figure behind her, shaped like a standing missile, with a long robe swooping out beneath their shins. A high, tight collar ran up their neck, leading to a well-fitting garb of uniform material draped on a willowy body. Stylized patterns of green and yellow and orange danced around the cloth, changing color in rolling waves, similar to Yusay'ne's dress. Circling their feet, 4 or 5 house cats rubbed on the robe, meowing in a jittery, hungry chorus.
That's so disconcerting, and I don't know why.
The tall figure's arms were behind their back, narrow chest out, with 2 dark inset eye cavities with white reflective dots where pupils would be. The long, stark, ancient face towered over Alex under a beam of cool moonlight, pausing the teacher's heart and breath for a flash. This must be Nigel. Do I say that? Is hello offensive here? Luckily, the slender creature began, his voice surprising Alex with its banality. Greetings, Archfiend. I am Nigel Roe. I understand you are new in town, and therefore within the Rose. As such, I will begin with a welcome, should you have failed to receive one. My kitties have told me you and your friend were looking to find me. If so, please say yes. Nigel sniffed the air, and Alex began to notice the pale of his eyes was rarely focused on him, or his cats, or anything at all.
He's blind?
The kitten has your tongue, I see, Nigel said, reaching into his sleeve. Better give it back before it eats it. Meat doesn't last long in the claws of a feline. I should know. With a slow wave, he opened his long hand and dropped a handful of treats on the ground. Alex snapped to attention. Thank you for the warm welcome.
Don't stutter, for the love of God.
You heard right. I was hoping to speak with you. What could you wish to know from little old me, Mr. Barker? Unless you wish to join the ranks of those who would fight the oppressors? No, not exactly. And it's Alex. But at this point, you can call me whatever. Everyone else does. Call me an imp, see if I care. Yusay'ne tensed at the word and puffed steam out through her nostrils. The cats hissed and meowed in response before returning to their treats. Mr. Barker! Why on all of earth and oon would I call a beautiful creature something as horrid as that word? Nigel said. Perhaps where you come from people speak to one another in such menial ways, but not here. I live according to all polite Phobos societal standards, you know. Or do you think because I use dread I am abhorrent? Because I once hailed from Phobos I am unclean? We fear above all else what one would think of us should we fail to be pleasant company. You are Archfiend, yes? Of course you are. Then shame on you. We of the darkness must help one another, not smother. Thank you. I agree, and I apologize if I offended you, Alex said, feeling relieved. Nice to know there are still people who don't just throw around the term willy-nilly. Alex quoted his grandfather to the best of his memory, trusting his conviction was applicable to the situation. Being immigrants from Bangladesh to 1940s rural Arizona, his grandparents knew a thing or two about jerks thinking they could say hurtful things and get away with it.
And boy, if they tried, Gramps let 'em have it.
His grandfather's favorite story involved a man named Bob and his son, Rob, both as dull as the broadside of a train, who'd tried to swindle him out of their gas-powered lawnmower by offering to buy it for pennies on the dollar of the original price. When Grandpa Parai had said, "No, get lost," they spray-painted the words, "Get out Asians," in big orange letters on their garage.
But Gramps hit him back.
The idiots had picked a fight with the head of loans in the only bank in town,
And weren't approved for any future refinancing options.
Sadly, Bob, Rob, and his mother, Debbie, had been forced to relocate to Utah due to financial hardship and were never seen or heard from again. Nigel seemed pleased.
You'll hear no such language from me. The fact that my world is made from the survival instincts of this universe does not mean I wish to spread what many call fear. My people live in caves, not dung heaps like the Veen. Filthy scavengers.
Yusay'ne folded her arms and waited, looking both suspicious and embittered at Alex.
Okay, there's a big lesson learned. Don't say imp around imps.
How did you know we were seeking you out? Alex asked jovially, trying to steer the conversation.
My boy, reading intentions is one of my specialties,
Nigel said.
A soul within the rose reeking of wrath and speaking my name is hard not to pay attention to, especially when so many have come before you. I assume you want to know the same thing they did. Go on, say it.
I want to ask you about the demon and the boy.
Of course you do. It's all anyone can talk about anymore, isn't it?
Nigel said woefully.
The archfiend who's ruining the fun for the rest of us. Wish I'd never met him. Everything I've said was published by the Trivium Exodus. You can read it for yourself.
I know, Alex said confidently. I want to know what you didn't tell the reporters, or the Senate.
Didn't? Whatever do you mean?
Nigel asked. There's no point in hiding it. I know he told you more, because I met him too. Last week. Alex lied the only way he knew how, by telling the truth. I know what it's like to be in Joseph's presence, but there's no one I can talk to. Please, we could swap stories. What do you say? Alex knelt to pet one of the cats that had approached him and congratulated himself on a fib well told.
Even the cat's convinced.
Nigel released a scratchy laugh and smiled.
Ah, so you have also seen the Nameless. Here now it all begins to make sense. Yusay'ne, thank you for your help. I will accompany our friend from here. I don't think that's a good idea,
she argued. Nigel waved her off.
It is perfectly all right. I do not think young Alexander will harm me. In fact, he's the most gentle archfiend I've ever met. Take the rest of the night off. Go. Enjoy the party. Seek out a few rounds in the Bach pits. Why not? Someone's bound to defeat you eventually. Perhaps tonight is the night.
Yusay'ne sneered at his patronizing. Very well. Turning to Alex, she gave a slight, respectful nod.
Mr. Barker, I enjoyed our chat. Come and see us again soon.
Slinking down the hall, she was soon lost to the darkness.
Bet she suspects something.
You've no idea how reassuring it is to meet another like me,
Nigel said once they were alone.
I've been disavowed, my life threatened. I fear I will be labeled a liar, unless the worst comes to pass, in which case it will hardly matter. Tell me, have you told anyone you've seen Joseph?
No, Alex answered.
Don't. They will only ridicule you. If I could go back in time and stop myself from reporting the damn thing, I would. I'm only blind of earthly sight, not of common sense. I know it's led to the very tensions currently in the unearthed Senate. but 3 other eyewitnesses have corroborated. And still, the headlines read, Nigel Roe, poet of death. Can you imagine? Using my love of poetry against me to sell news? All I did was tell the truth, which, take it from me, is the scariest thing of all.
Nigel started down the service tunnel, moving even farther away from the club. His cats followed, crowding his feet.
Please, walk with an old unearthed creature. I need to use these legs or they'll wither and fade.
He left space beside him for Alex.
Sure, yeah.
Alex gulped, hurrying to meet the tall, thin man in a robe.
Okay, caution up. Be ready for anything, but don't look like you're ready for anything.
Could you tell me what the demon, the nameless whatever, told you?
He asked. Nigel gestured with his chopstick fingers.
No. First, I wish to hear your tale, Mr. Barker. Where and how did you meet the enigmatic Joseph?
Africa, Alex answered.
Outside of Cairo. Raytheons attacked, and he was with them. I've seen some scary things in my days, but that takes the cake.
Real good demon talk, Alex. Ugh.
So, he did make it across the sea. I had no doubt. What of his quest? I assume it's all he spoke of. His obsession with a certain set of rocks. Yeah, the brothers or something. Guy sounded like a nut,
Alex said.
I curse the day I first heard of the Brothers of Gehenna. One chance meeting has haunted me ever since, and will probably continue to do so. At first, I assumed Joseph was an archfiend. He did not appear the way most possessed mortals do, and his wrath was strong. He thought of no custom, and gave no damn as to what anyone thought of his actions. The most independently minded of your kind I've ever encountered since meeting Yusay'ne. Fabulous, isn't she? One of the Nil Nulus, you know. Also one of a kind. Never will you find a more humble, inquisitive fiend. She has changed the way I view your species. I often feel you think as a hive mind. A dumb one at that. No offense.
None taken, Alex said.
I thought Joseph was perhaps recently born, or one of a new batch of purged,
Nigel admitted.
The Senate regularly cleans house every century or so, just to keep those of us below well reminded of our plebeian status. And the new generations feel different, don't they? Each less pure than the one previous. All thanks to the rotten Eve draining off this planet like mold in a sewer pipe. Mark my words, the humans will be the death of us, far before any new war has a chance to do so.
So, he sought you out? What for? Alex asked.
It was an unusual exchange, to be sure. I asked this Joseph if he wanted a drink. He refused, but agreed to tell me a little of his tale. He needed passage, and knew I've spent a majority of my time traveling. Seems he had trouble moving about the human world. Not so unusual when speaking of an unearthed human. Little did I know.
Alex spotted a black section in the hall approaching, where an obstructed overhead window was blocking the moonlight. Did he eventually tell you what this Gehenna was? He asked.
That's all he talked about,
Nigel replied.
He said it is a place rumored to be where sin itself was created, active long ago. So long, even the oldest in unearth knew not of it, from back when man first learned to hate. Fascinating story. The shepherds of the wrath were a people who'd mastered the art of collecting the essence of destruction. These 3 vessels, called the Brothers of Gehenna, sounded very important. A rumored source of unthinkable power.
One cat meowed angrily. The other three echoed. And what do you think he wants this power for? Alex asked as dryly as possible.
Just stay calm. Everything will be fine.
One could only guess as to what possibilities lie within the brothers soaked in sin,
Nigel added solemnly.
It is just a story, after all. Though the demon did speak ill of Lucifer a Vale. Quite a lot, now that I think of it. Perhaps he had designs on the throne he intended to achieve through machinations. However, I did not find this particular archfiend to seem power-hungry. Determined, yes, but also tired. Like a being looking for quiet rather than conquest. But I've been wrong before. Needless to say, I did not like what I sensed.
More drawn-out meows came from below. And did you help him? Alex asked, feeling an unease growing in his gut.
Of course not. I've worked far too hard harnessing good relationships with my contacts, benefactors, and otherwise,
Nigel said.
I couldn't have risked my reputation on a creature as lowly as he. I'm sure you understand.
It sounded as though Nigel was wrapping up the conversation.
Fine by me.
I understand, Alex said. Well, if that's it, I'll say thank you and stop taking up your precious time. He saved himself from stuttering on the T.
Please, not necessary. I live to talk,
Nigel said warmly.
But to do so, I must first listen. One thing I've not heard, Mr. Barker, is your own intentions for the future. Why do you come here, to this club, with a being smelling of rapture, looking for an unnamed creature now named Joseph, who is searching for the brothers of Gehenna? I trust you have encountered the demon, but now I want to know what's inside your heart.
His tone lowered. The meows went up in pitch.
For I have my suspicions.
Alex's insides twitched as he and Nigel passed through the shadowed section of the hall. Glancing up at Nigel, whose black eyes shimmered in the darkness, the teacher nearly gasped when the pale man's face turned down on him.
Can he see?
One more thing the demon said prior to leaving.
Nigel's jaw snapped up and down, his voice dropping another tone, growing even more scratchy.
I knew I'd smelled it once before. This strange blend of wrath. What was the added element I couldn't place?
The cat's meows were becoming voracious. Alex considered firing up his wrath, just in case.
Feeling a little agitated here.
Nigel continued.
When the savage admitted it, Joseph, I confess I went berserk. To find out I was speaking with a human vessel, a mortal bonded with the Eve, cavorting freely. Can you imagine? Empowered by it. The idea is disgusting beyond rebuttal. I demanded he leave and never return. The whoreson agreed, but not before telling me that others like him might be sent to find him. Sent by Medolians. On a mission.
Nigel stopped in his tracks, his black eyes with white pupils fixed on Alex.
Imagine my surprise when news of the Senate's plan reached my ears. I never believed I would meet one of the chosen human delegates.
Alex's heart skipped a beat. No idea what you're talking about. I've never even met a Medolian. Avoid them like the human plague. I avoid humans, too. Sorry to be rude, but I should get back to my partner. Before Alex could step away, Nigel took the teacher by the shoulders. His long fingers ran over him like heavy spider legs, keeping him in place. A low growl shook Alex's spine.
Mortals?
Nigel said as though he'd just been told he'd ingested poison.
In this place? A sanctuary of unearth?
More meowing, louder than ever. The cats could tell something was up. Nigel Roe's white pupils began to glow like lightning bugs. His lips spread to extremes, revealing inches of gum line. His words became lined with disgust.
The demon and the boy will be caught and tried, but not by you. Never by a foul, impure wretch. The Medolians in the Senate have truly lost their ability to regulate if this is their solution.
Alex fought to get his arms free, squirming away from Nigel's face, a snarl of malice growing upon it.
I will pump you full of fear, slit your throat, and drink your juice,
Nigel said.
Your dread will ascend to Phobos. Your blood, ripe with it, will give me strength. I adore the taste of human flesh, Alexander, as do my kitties. Your mixture of wrath and flesh will be an exquisite treat. I shall have to thank whoever sent you here. They've given me a wonderful meal.
A thin line stretched from the middle of Nigel Roe's forehead, down between his eyes, to his chin. The line, a skin flap Alex had failed to see in the dark, lifted. With a quick, wet breath, Nigel exhaled, and the slit down his face opened outward like double doors. His jaw and skull were cleaved wide, leaving his fat tongue dripping saliva onto his robe. The small, button eyes of the old blind man were revealed as shimmering insectoid lenses under his skull, dark and empty as space. The mass around them was a web of red and yellow tendons, torn, shifting and snapping, among sharp crimson and bone-colored protrusions like bursts of light. The open cavity below Nigel's upper teeth roared over Alex's face, assaulting him with vicious, wet breath, rocketing Alex's wrath to the surface, taking hold of his mind before he could have a heart attack.
Kill it!
Clenching his fist tightly, he lit it aflame. Alex's arm launched up, connecting with the underside of what was once Nigel's face, now worse than any nightmare he'd ever had, sending sparks and ash exploding out. The cats scattered as the mouth cavity shrieked, buying him a few seconds. Alex fought off Nigel's claw-like grip and stumbled free, but the monster's frame was soon over him. Ducking, Alex swung to the side, ready to attack, wishing his fists would light up as brightly as they had when Yuri was about to be killed. Before he could throw a punch, Nigel's splayed hand swatted him away. Alex slammed into the wall, feeling his insides jam up. Landing hurt, too. Nigel's open face screamed like a jet engine streaking by as he leapt into the air, arms and legs outstretched.
This is your chance.
Pulling his arm back, Alex imagined striking Nigel to the moon and gritted his teeth.
I hate you. Got it? Hate you.
His fist sprang to life as the monster came down upon him. It connected with the bone protrusions in Nigel's face. One snapped off in his knuckle as the monster was sent soaring into the ceiling, collapsing with chunks of concrete in a dusty mess Alex was too busy running like hell in the other direction to notice. When he pulled the barb from his hand, scorching blood oozed free, sizzling on the ground as he ran. Behind him, Nigel screamed like a titanic, rabid bat.
Scythe, this. Bad. Got it.
The end of the hallway finally came into view.
There's a door. I can make it. I can make it.
Alex pushed himself. His legs were burning. He then heard the same hushed whisper that had called his name in the Thai restaurant just before he'd died.
Alex?
The voice was louder this time, but the speaker's identity remained a mystery. Then came a flash before his eyes, so powerful it blotted out the rest of reality. Melissa was before him, as clear as day, Her expression wiped with pain. Blood ran down her face in interconnecting rivers, joining red tears streaming from her eyes, soaked in crimson. She screamed in silence. Clutched in each hand was a dove, stained red, dead and broken, gone limp, dripping blood. Alex felt his insides fall out as if he were on a roller coaster, and he heard a deafening pop. Reality came back long enough for him to hear what sounded like leather flapping all around him, just before something akin to a dozen needles stabbed into his back, and he was lifted off his feet, crying out in agony. The tall creature below him shrieked and clamped its jaw onto his shoulder. Alex felt his rage erupt, with little he could do about it. His hands blazed like red-hot coals, and his chest gushed scalding steam.
You want to do this? Fine.
When he touched down, Alex kicked back against the wall as hard as he could, sending both he and Nigel Roe rocketing backward at breakneck speed, crashing through 3 consecutive walls.
Whoa! I can do that?
Sharp chunks of concrete and steel flew by as Nigel's throat hole released satisfying howls of pain. Alex tumbled through a 4th wall with the monster, where they were assaulted by the bombastic music of the Rose's Platinum Hall. Dust and rock scattered across the dance floor as Alex landed on top of Nigel, feeling the Scythe's body being racked over awkward stone shapes.
Ha! Serves you right.
Rolling away, Alex leapt to his feet. Keeping a hateful gaze on his attacker, he gradually acknowledged the silenced clubgoers gathered around him, gawking with even more shock than he was expecting. Feeling a sudden breeze, he found his shirt torn open. The crowd was agape, not just at the intrusion, but also at the blazing bullhead brand glowing on his chest.
Ah. Shoot.
From the rubble pile, Nigel screamed,
"It's a human! The humans from the Mandate are here!"
Like a gun had gone off, the crowd scattered as Nigel spun up from the ground and flung himself after Alex. Not wanting to wait for the attack to come to him, Alex charged the monstrosity, darting through the panicking crowd, ending in a collision with the Scythe. Focusing on keeping his cockroach face from ripping out his jugular, Alex decided to fling them through a row of cocktail tables near the bar, finding himself enjoying doing so.
It's my first bar fight. Wait until Melissa hears about this.
"Relent, Mr. Barker,"
Nigel's throat hole spat out.
"I must feast on your soul."
Alex sent a fist into the gap between his skull, where it sizzled like a wet ribeye on a scalding grill, drawing a horrendous scream from the pale Scythe. Stumbling away, whimpering, Nigel called to the rafters.
"Yusay'ne, I was wrong. It wasn't easy. Where are you?"
Looking up just in time, Alex spotted Nigel's bodyguard leaping from the 2nd-story landing. She landed gracefully and moved like a goddamn giant bird, lost in the scattered crowd.
Shoot. Not good.
Feeling a presence behind him, he spun, ready to attack, stopping just short of impaling a familiar soldier's face.
"Bennett?"
Alex cried. His partner pointed behind Alex and yanked him out of the way just as a shimmering orange flash soared by. Yusay'ne landed behind them in a cluster of warring patrons, again lost.
"Where in the hell are you?"
Bennett slurred.
"Are you drunk?"
Alex shouted. Bennett answered by laughing madly and shaking his head. The sea of bodies split as Yusay'ne charged out once more and tackled Bennett. Before Alex could help, Nigel was upon him, his grotesque face like a tiny red jungle, snapping with jagged teeth. Alex turned his baseball cap down so he didn't have to see it as he assaulted Nigel's slender body. Connecting against his ribs, cracking several, he sent the old Scythe into a frenzy. Clawed hands raked over Alex's back and opened fresh contusions. washing his skin with hot blood as the teacher pressed on, feeling a sense of desperation and the need to survive take hold. His mind flashed with white light, and he was once again faced by her. Melissa stood stark naked before him, a pure being. Her gaze connected with his own for a blissful moment before the rivers returned. Blood ran down her face as it morphed from peace to pain. Gripping the blood-soaked doves until they were crushed in her hands, she screamed, releasing no sound. A fire of unearth wrapped around him and Melissa, scorching her flesh, but not his. Smoke billowed around Alex until all went black, and reality took hold of his consciousness, revealing he was locked in a struggle with Nigel, their arms intertwined. Judging by the frustration in the Scythe's cries, Alex, the weak human, was baffling him.
He expected me to be a free meal, but I could break this guy if I wanted to, if I brought up enough hate.
As tempting as it was, the notion terrified Alex. Across the dance floor, Bennett was taking hits, but giving out few of his own. When a short bar patron with hairy, bulky arms and a smile the size of a watermelon struck him in the lower spine, Bennett went to the ground.
To heck with this!
Alex hurled the scythe to the side and darted for the dance floor, where his partner was being surrounded and beaten by angry unearthed clubgoers. Charging up, Alex leapt and landed in the middle of the crowd, blasting them away like a stack of beanbags hit with a rock. Grabbing as many throats as he could, pounding in as many faces as possible, Alex felt a glorious sense of relief wash over him. With Bennett freed, the duo backpedaled onto the dance floor, just in time to spot club security arriving. Guards and clubgoers alike circled them. Bodies shifted in the lasers rebounding across the club as the humans were met with a constricting ring of fangs, claws, glowing eyes, and tails dancing in the air. Nigel and Yusay'ne found their way to the front. His face snapped back together in the visage of an old, blind man, weak and tired.
After an ass whooping,
"That one tried to kill me! Don't let them escape!"
Nigel pointed his long finger at Alex.
"So, any bright ideas?"
Alex asked over Bennett's shoulder. The soldier turned and gave a silent, dull-eyed stare. "You're kidding, right?"
definitely drunk.